Silksong is just absolutely phenomenal. It's not only the best game that came out this year in my opinion, which is insane to say considering Expedition came out this year, it's also contender for the best game ever made, which is insane. Amongst incredible level design, genuinely crazy mind-shattering enemy variety, awesome atmosphere, top tier soundtrack, just world design out of this world, and Team Cherry's charm from Hollow Knight cranked up to 100. This game also vastly improved upon the boss design and has a boss roster so good I would proclaim it as a top 5 of all time, which is insane. This game has an insane amount of memorable bosses, and while not every single one of them is like incredibly top tier mechanically, pretty much every single one of them is memorable, for better or for worse. And in this video I will rank these bosses starting from the very worst and going up to the very best. And I will of course do this based on quality because I find difficulty ranking incredibly boring and uninteresting. There is no discourse, you can't discuss anything, it's just lame. If you like these kinds of videos, please be sure to like and subscribe, it helps out the channel massively and I will greatly appreciate it. But now, with everything introductory out of the way, let's get into the ranking. Alright, as incredible as Silksong is, it's just pretty unrealistic to have a game this big having absolutely zero bad bosses. And in my opinion, the worst of the worst in this game is the Broodmother, which is absolutely abysmal. I wouldn't say it's one of the worst bosses I've ever fought or anything, but it pretty much has everything I don't like about boss design in this game, and there is just very little, if anything at all, to like. I think this boss is just very lame and boring, but it's also insanely annoying and it pisses me off. It has annoying double damage on contact, which is probably one of my biggest issues with some of the bosses, especially if you pogo the boss in a weird way and the boss moves up and hits you. It is really weird and I don't like it. Sure, you can call this a skill issue, and I do suck at this boss, and I will admit that. However, I have no desire to ever learn it or fight it again because I just absolutely hate it. For example, I completely suck at Carmelita, but I still think she's one of the greatest bosses of all time, while I can't say the same about Broodmother. So it's not just about the difficulty. I just don't really think there's anything in Broodmother fight that makes this encounter worthwhile. This also has a lovely feature that I just absolutely love in boss fights, which are those forced enemy gauntlets in between. Sure, it's not like that would be a deal breaker if I like the boss besides that, but if you just add this little feature I don't really love, it's not very great. Genuinely, I don't think there's anything about this boss that I really like. It's gross and ugly, which would be fine, but honestly, this one can stay in the ditch where it came from, and I don't think I will ever fight it again because it's like super optional. So yeah, Team Cherry, maybe please don't bring back this boss for Pantheons or something. Can we make this deal, please? I will try to go through the bosses a bit quicker because there are so many and we need to get through these in a sensible time. However, Plasmified Zango really doesn't have much to talk about, so this is a good time to put this to test. I don't think Plasmified Zango is like one of the worst bosses ever. Sure, first playthrough I thought he was absolutely awful, but later I found out he's there more for the quest than actually fighting him head on, which slightly improves it. I like the lore implications for lifeblood overtaking and creating this corrupted form of life. It's a decently cool moment, but besides that, there is nothing to like, and this boss is annoying. Also, completing the quest by just farming the little guys is way easier than this, so I don't really see much of a reason to do this. Do I really hate this boss? No. But do I think he is necessary in any way besides the cool lifeblood implication? Also no. Honestly, just don't really care. It's okay that he exists, but this is obviously not one of Team Cherry's greatest creations. Maybe a spicy take, and maybe you expected some other bosses that are generally not very beloved to see before this, but in my opinion, Watcher of the End is definitely not great. It's a elite enemy with a pretty alright moveset, but honestly way too punishing with maybe the worst runback in the game. I genuinely think I am pretty generous putting this guy in D tier because it's just a cool moment. This guy has an insane amount of aura, and it's really cool lore-wise that this final guardian was guarding the realm here till the end of time, and I'm glad he exists for this game, kinda. Like with a lot of things I don't really love. However, this guy in specific is not great. I did not enjoy my time fighting him, and I don't think I will ever refight him. He exists, but that's it. I don't really care for the rest. The Pale is in a very similar spot. Overall, it's a pretty beautiful boss in the beautiful Lost Kingdom of Verdania, which would be nice, and having two bosses in this super missable area is pretty damn awesome. However, that's pretty much about it. This boss has literally one attack that, to be fair, gets upgraded over time and is a pretty good one, but besides that, there is not much to love. It's decently fun to dodge, but nothing mind-shattering. There is way better stuff. If it was just this, I would probably place it somewhere in the decent tier. here. However, the thing that really sours it for me is the awful, absolutely god-awful run back, because if you die in Verdania, you have to redo the whole area basically. I don't really like to include runbacks in my ratings overall if it's not a major issue, but that's the thing, if it's not a major issue. If I really like a boss and he has a runback that slightly sours it, I'm not going to subtract much. But if the boss is just alright or I don't like it, plus an annoying runback, it just added to the frustration for me, and I will definitely rate it. Just like in a Pale Stag case, because unfortunately, call it a skill issue, I died to this boss and I did not enjoy running back to it. However, it's still not one of the worst things ever. It's alright, I guess. Acceptable, mediocre, call it something like that. This boss, on the other hand, is pretty damn cool. The atmosphere is top-notch, the animations are really cool, the lore is really great, a lot of stuff to love. And also mechanically, there are some pretty cool ideas and neat concepts, like the projectiles he uses, or the spears that can overlap, though not too often. So why is this boss that low? It's so boring. This boss is way too tanky for where it's placed and absolutely overstays its welcome. If this boss was shorter, I'd probably place it in the C tier, probably pretty high up too, because if this was a cool little encounter, I'd like it. But this boss fight goes on for way too long with a way too limited moveset. It's just too boring. There are also some really weird pace breakers with him vanishing all the time, and there are, of course, also are some enemies, which, to be fair, I like the enemies. I love that they're used here, because I think it's the only spot where they are, but I just think it breaks the flow of the fight way too much. And this boss also has one of my least favorite features in this game for bosses again, where if you stagger a boss, you don't get the punish window, he just vanishes. I think that's just really boring and it makes the fight longer. If that wasn't there, at least the fight would be a little bit shorter. So I don't think there's anything good coming from that feature in particular, and I think it definitely tarnishes this boss a decent bit. Like, why make him stagger at all if you just take away the window anyway? But yeah, this boss is definitely pretty close to the decent tier, and I don't despise it or anything. I think there are a decent amount of things to like. I just think the overall experience is rather boring and way too long. The best thing about Gur the Outcast is not even the boss fight itself, but rather the build up to it. You, the hunter, becomes the hunted. It's really cool, and I like the change that for once in this tracking down process of one of those hunts, you yourself have to pay attention because the way towards Gur is littered with dangerous traps. And another very amazing side effect is that by engaging with these traps, you basically learn an attack from the fight, which makes the long run back more excusable because you basically already have stuff to know about the boss fight, which makes it less likely to die. However, truthfully, it doesn't really matter to begin with, because in my opinion, Gur might be one of the easiest bosses of all time. The only thing he does is he throws around traps that don't even try to go for you, and sometimes does a slide dash. I have never died to this boss, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. If you just keep it cool, it's very easy, and there are only some very few overlaps that are dangerous, and even if you get hit during those, you get plenty amount of opportunities to recover. So, while this boss is cool in concept and has some cool aspects, as a fight it's rather lacking and not very interesting. I think this boss maybe could be expanded upon, and then he could be a genuine menace. I don't know how much of a hot take this is, honestly, and maybe it's a bit mean, but I think the Pinstress is just okay. She's a very cool and endearing character, and I find her animation and her charm quite great. But I have to say, the fight itself, I don't really mess with much. Like, it's okay. I personally like the flying enemies in Silksong, the way they behave, back off, try to bait you. It's fun. However, a boss fight that definitely overstays its welcome is not something I wanted. Sure, there are some cool attacks like the cross or some of her combos that leave you guessing, but it's just not that interesting, and I feel like she spends just too much of the time out of your reach. Moveset wise, I put this toward lower its mediocre tier. However, overall enjoyment and charm of the character still brings this back a decent amount, and while I didn't enjoy my experience fully, I don't think it's a bad fight by any means. It's okay. Father of Flame has a pretty damn badass name and a pretty cool design. He also has some pretty damn interesting lore, and it's just a very cool set piece you find. A cool little unique tucked away boss as a secret that is very much appreciated on this amazing long journey. But next to some of these absolutely incredible and great bosses further down the line, can I really say this is amongst them? Not really. He is just okay. I totally understand if you don't like this boss, but me personally, I had some fun with him. It's a cool little pogo minigame where you need to acrobatically automatically avoids some flames while you dance around it. It's really neat, honestly. The visuals are nice, and while this boss only has 2 attacks, there is this challenge that you don't gain any silk, which makes it more tense and dangerous. Overall, not one of the greatest or most memorable bosses ever, but certainly one that enhances the overall experience in my opinion. And I think a low decent tier or maybe a mediocre one is just the right spot for him. He's cool. Alright. Hear me out. I know this boss is pretty much universally despised, and I completely understand why. There are a lot of things about this boss that just aren't very good. First, it's a reuse of a boss in the game with just less interesting mechanics, which I do agree with. Second of all, the minions that this boss summons, unlike the other ones which work better with the fight, can even be considered a bit bullshit because sometimes the fire blends in with the background. I do acknowledge all these issues, and I completely understand if someone would say this boss is just terrible. However, what I can't lie is that I never really found this boss super frustrating. I was really frustrated by the first one on my first playthrough, but the second one I never minded. I do think one thing that kinda carries this fight for me is the arena. You have to position pretty well for him to just destroy the platforms where you can still allow to move decently well and outmaneuver all of his moves. And I also really like the usage of tools and like the planning of the whole thing. Like, what tools will I use? How will I position? How to burst down these enemies before they become overwhelming? All these things just make it kind of a strategic fight for me. I don't think Beast Fight 2 is like good per se, but I find it really engaging and intense, and that's the reason why I decided to place it here. So yeah, Beast Fight 2 maybe way higher than you expected, and maybe it should be a bit lower, but I'd say after 4 playthroughs where I beat him, I think this is where I roughly feel like he is. Mouse Mother is not a boss I would consider like really great or amazing. I wouldn't also say she has like a lot of replay value on future runs, but she's honestly just such a competent tutorial boss that I have to give her some praise. In my opinion, all games should be designed the way that you don't really require playing other games to understand the game's mechanics. And while Mouse Mother is not complex, if you played Hollow Knight before or even some other Metroidvanias, I still think Mouse Mother very competently explains you a lot of mechanics. It explains you the falling debris one, which is telegraphed very well. It explains you some little crowd control with the enemies, and even like a startup charge attack with a clear tell. It's not very deep and it's quite barren, but honestly it's just executed very well, and I think it's really good. Also, the first soundtrack already going this hard is just really the most Larkin thing of all time. God, Silksong OST is so good. Skull Tyrant is just really mediocre moveset wise. If it was just moveset, this guy would probably be D tier or something. He's just okay. However, what really elevates this boss for me is how he's used. First off, fighting basically the big skull brute master of all these enemies in the Marrow is really nice, but the even cooler thing is, of course, the raid on your village. I was just checking in on Bone Bottoms to see what happened, basically just chilling, and suddenly this big guy just rushes across the screen and destroys so many parts of the village, and even unfortunately killed some of the NPCs. It's just such a shocking event, and it's so great. These moments, these little attention to detail thingies is something Silksong truly excels at, and he's just another example of it. It's very memorable, very shocking, even has a sad follow-up, and I just really like it. The boss fight isn't bad, but like, there really just isn't much to it. He's not more complex than Mouse Mother really. But yeah, Skull Tyrant, definitely overall a pretty solid experience. Finding Waldworm was just really cool. He's a decently hidden little guy in the Vault Nest, which is just a sub-area of the Sands of Karak, and stuff like this, as you maybe already can guess, is just something I really value. Is this boss groundbreaking or something incredible that you will remember in 20 years? Probably not. The boss is just alright, but it's a cool 2D type boss. I enjoy dodging his attack patterns, even though they are pretty easy, but it's very satisfying, forces you to do some little basic positioning, and I just enjoy it. It's cool. The visuals are also quite neat, and I just really love the reward. The color of your silk skills after you get this is just beautiful, and I just love it. Overall, not much to complain. It's just a cute little nice boss, and I'm pretty damn glad he exists. Gordon Ramsay, on the other hand, makes the best out of very little. This boss doesn't have much to offer in the way of attack variety, but the attacks feel very dangerous. And it's of course because of the super dangerous muck maggots.
Look at me, look at me, eyes! Not as pissed as I am! am! You fucking are! Donkey!
Yeah, if you get hit by this, your silk starts draining and you need to heal to even get rid of it first. Otherwise, you can't recover any health. So while this boss doesn't have the hardest to avoid attacks or a crazy plethora of them, getting hit by one of these is very bad and it can get super intense. Besides that, the chef slams you with her massive gyat, which is of course a very dangerous attack you need to be aware of because like most bosses, this boss also does double damage. It has some pretty cool and nice positioning avoids. The flow patterns are really fun and I just really enjoy this fight. Honestly, it's pretty damn solid and I don't have anything against it. It's a cool addition to the game and I even think this boss could definitely be beat here with a few little tweaks and maybe a little tiny amount of additions. Honestly, not much to complain. Pretty damn decent. Lost Garment is pretty decent mechanically. His base moveset, which is overall really mediocre, but added with some of the void attacks that enhance it, is pretty intense and it took me a few tries to defeat him, so mechanically not bad. However, this is very much the emotional sad boss. Garment's journey is an incredible quest line. Following him was incredible and he was just a very lovable and likable character. One of my favorites in Silksong. And seeing how his journey ends with the build up towards it and the conclusion is just heartbreaking stuff. And overall, this boss is basically hard carried by this incredible moment, which I already talked about in my favorite moments in Silksong, if you want more elaboration on this. It's really damn good, but the boss itself is just alright. So I think somewhere around the lower B part is just the right spot for him. Chakra is an awesome character that you just can't but love. And honestly, that's probably my biggest enjoyment of this fight. Like, just having a chill sparring session with Chakra is cool. Her fight is overall also just good because it's a very insane flow and she's pretty damn tough, let me tell you that. You can die super quickly to her and it feels good because it's an insane back and forth. Her moveset is limited, but it's still hard to react to and finding punish windows was pretty damn hard and intense. I do think this boss isn't like one of the greatest things ever made, but I do think it's quite nice. And for this, I place it somewhere around the lower side of B tier. It's definitely better than Garment's moveset, but Garment's moment is better, so I think I like these bosses around the same. It's just a fun, nice little sparring session with one of the best characters in the game. And yeah, what is there not to like? It's pretty damn nice. Initially, I had both the Moss Mother bosses grouped as one entry, but the more I thought about it, the more it just didn't make sense. They are just way too different to be rated in the same category. While the solo Moss Mother is just a solid tutorial boss, as I mentioned before, the duo Moss Mother is really interesting because it made one simple boss into a decently challenging encounter, where you actually can die if you're not careful. A lot of people do boss randomizer challenges or doubling enemies challenges because they're probably curious how it is if the encounters were doubled. And Moss Mother, from a super easy boss, suddenly goes into a decently challenging one, which is just something that doesn't always work out. Like, for example, doubling final bosses turns out to be pretty bullshit usually, which makes sense because it wasn't designed for a gank. But two Moss Mothers works surprisingly well. You just have to manage the simple aspects of Moss Mother, but twice, and if they stack, they can create some pretty intense scenarios. It is overall a pretty damn good fight, and it's fun as well. It's pretty hidden, and the reward is also good. Honestly, I don't have much to complain. It's a pretty damn competent gank and it's fun to fight. Sister Splinter is a pretty damn good early game boss, and gatekeeps one of the most important abilities, the wall jump. It's not very hard, but it's pretty damn fun. The boss starts by enclosing you in thorns, and that already teaches you one mechanic of the fight, which is helpful because she will use it throughout. Besides that, the boss slams down with her hands, where you can punish them while she slams down if you position correctly, and she also summons minions and covers the arena with thorns. It restricts your movement and forces you to be very proactive and make space again, and you can also bait the enemies into being slammed by her. She's a pretty damn good boss, and it's a fight about crowd control. Overall, a really solid fight. I have no issues. The only thing I wonder about is, why did they nerf this boss? I kinda understand nerfing the other certain wall we will talk about later, because he is pretty damn hard for where he is placed, but this boss I'm just confused about. However, I maybe also understand it because it's a mandatory boss. Overall though, it doesn't change the enjoyment or the mechanics of the fight at all, and I still like it. It's a good boss. Crawfather just reminded me once again how much I value creativity and uniqueness and also variety in a boss roster. A great example of this are also Wukong and Night Rain, which have a lot of unique bosses. Especially in case of Wukong, there are a lot of just decent bosses, but most of them are memorable, just for some cool gimmicks or interactions. Introducing the Crawfather. This is basically a gauntlet with a boss in it that is just a support unit. You can use this guy to regain Silk easily, but you also need to be wary of his attacks that restrict the arena. But your biggest enemy in this gauntlet, of course, are the great Crow enemies. But you already know them from the first hours of the game, so you should be fine. I don't think this boss is super hard, but I do think it's super fun. It's also cool to see that a lot of people, where I watched the rankings, shared my sentiment on this boss, where they thought no way this could work or be good, but then were pleasantly surprised. And I do think it's very true. I always try to keep an open mind for bosses like this, and I'm very glad I do. It's just a really cool addition to Act 3, and I'm really damn glad he exists. It's a very cool boss, and I think it deserves a place in the B tier. The uniqueness praise just doesn't stop. Bell Eater is an incredibly awesome looking boss and has honestly some really neat mechanics. It's also tied to one of my favorite moments in Silksong, so that does help. There is just one issue that drags this fight down a bit for me, and it's the same as Unraveled. I just think it's a bit too long and overstays its welcome, because while the attacks and how the fight works are pretty good, maybe the fight takes just a tiny bit too long for me. However, this could also of course be a skill issue that I don't know how to kill it faster. I think the fight is pretty damn awesome. The fact that the boss itself is so big and the body restricts your movement and makes the arena small is really great. And I'm happy that the head and his end segment have different attacks that require different approaches. It's really damn unique and a great boss. I do, however, think my favorite part, aside the unique setup and just a really cool fake out, is the ending of the fight, where Aira saves the day and it's revealed that Aira has children, plus you getting the warp to the Bell stations. It's just a super rewarding fight and one of the most glorious moments in Silksong. Overall, very solid boss. I think it's quite good. The conch flies shooting the little cones are terrorists. However, I do think flying enemies in Silksong are good, and I think these enemies are good as well, especially the way you can deflect the projectiles. However, a boss of these two would probably be really bad, right? Nope. Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, I have to say that this boss is once again a pretty competent gang, which is a pattern in Silksong. Silksong, and by extension Team Cherry, really knows how to make competent and good gangs. My only issue with this fight is it's not fully fledged out. This fight could go way harder with a lot more overlaps, and I just don't think it does. However, what we have is still really neat, especially appropriate for the stage of the game where it is, and it allows you to get early access to the pin stress, which gives you a pretty cool ability. It's a pretty neat fight and I do like it. However, something was missing, and let me tell you, there is a little surprise that maybe addresses this issue later in the video. Okay, I swear, I'm really not trying to be different or trying to be a contrarian or something. On my first playthrough, I said Beast Flight is worse than Bed of Chaos. I was crashing out and I absolutely despised this boss with all my heart. However, after clearing my mind a little bit and trying to re-explore the areas a bit more, get a bit stronger and just get a bit better at the boss, I have to say this is genuinely a pretty well designed boss. It's a very good crowd control fight. It forces you to kite around enemies and use the Beast Flight to manage them if there are too many, so it's a very good crowd control type boss, but that is balanced by the Beast Flight itself having a rather simple moveset. Yeah, my big annoyance with this fight on first playthrough especially was the double hard contact damage, and if you only have 5 masks, this is brutal. Maybe this guy should only do 1 hard contact damage, because it's already a pretty challenging fight at the early game, but then again, if he only did 1, maybe he would be a bit too easy. And he's not like a mandatory boss, he's not blocking your progress, so I think it's completely understandable that this guy is tough. I can't really shit on this guy, but praise some bosses in Elden Ring like Margit teaching you the same lesson. It would be unfair. Besides that, nowadays I just really enjoy the fight. First playthrough it was rough, but on replays it just grew on me a lot. The enemies work also really well with him. Well, mostly. I think these big flurry guys that fly around are maybe a bit too tanky and annoying for this part, but the others work really well. I just think it's a really cool boss in the early game, and while I initially hated it, it really grew on me. The fourth chorus would be a decent bit higher on my first playthrough, but over the playthroughs he went down like half a tier. The issue with him is his mechanics are just super easy, which for an early game boss is great and I do still enjoy them a good bit. However, it doesn't have that much replay value, which some other early game bosses do. With that said though, fourth chorus is just awesome. The animation work is stellar, his music is absolutely amazing, and I just love fighting him regardless. The positioning game feels still really cool and it's just a very fun boss. I was really hyped for him from the trailers and he lived up to that. He was like low A, maybe high B first playthrough, and now I would place him like mid B. He's pretty damn nice, but just not one of the best things Silksong has to offer. Still regardless, really cool, really enjoyable, and really memorable. Alright, I'm sure we arrived at what most would consider probably the most controversial take in the whole video. And let me tell you, I completely understand. Seeing Grohl in not only the B tier but also this high up in it might be very puzzling for some. And I understand. When I first fought Grohl, I thought this was genuinely the new worst boss of all time. Yes, worse than some of the other horrors I faced on my gaming journey. However, I think the biggest issue with Grohl and the thing that's holding him back is just the initial experience and the very painstaking way to learn him. Because besides that, I do think Grohl is a genuinely great encounter. Let me first talk about all the bad stuff. I think that the runback is bad. In general, you will not catch me defending or thinking runbacks are good. I think they're usually just a waste of time, in the sense of speaking about bosses. Long checkpoints in areas are great, love that. However, especially for a hard boss like Grohl, having a runback like this is just pretty damn annoying and makes it more frustrating than it should be. However, besides that, and a few other issues I have with Grohl, I think this is a unique and genuinely well thought out boss fight with a lot of personality and love put into it. Grohl is a massive cool frog guy, but he plays super dirty, basically what the entire area has been building up to. Once you arrive after the really long run back, especially if you don't find the secret bench, which I fortunately did, so thank God for that at least, you first have to fight off a massive wave of enemies from Biltwater. And I do think this gauntlet really grew on me. Fighting these enemies on these platforms is not unfun, and it allows you to learn how to deal with their patterns, which will be helpful in the fight as well. Plus, if you have the Mugmigot charm, which you can fight before, it just makes the fight more chill. However, you also sacrifice some offensive options by taking a blue tool, so if you play better, you might not even need this. And after you take care of this gauntlet, you get to fight the man himself, Grohl the Great. And Grohl has just a lot of cool things. He has the suck, which can be countered in a lot of different ways, even by throwing a bomb into his mouth. He has the exploding projectiles that are shot in very weird positions and need to be avoided by spacing them. And of course, his biggest danger, the double contact damage. Which leads me to another little problem of mine. I think the fact that he weirdly moves into you and does 2 masks of damage is pretty annoying, and I do not like that. Which is also an issue I have in general with a few bosses. However, besides that, the other additions like him summoning enemies to do one attack or him using the traps that were introduced in the gauntlet before are once again great. And then around phase 2, he gets the ability to conjure the power of soul from the first game, which was admittedly even in the first playthrough where I was completely raging a really cool moment. All I have to say about Grohl is this fight is great. However, the quality of life surrounding it is dreadful. Overall, I still enjoy him by now. I do think he's really fun for me and mastering him felt good, but damn do I understand if you hate this boss. If you have this boss at the bottom of your tier list, I can't fault you. So unfortunately, Grohl the Great couldn't quite live up to his name. However, he's still Grohl the Good. The next 2 bosses I was going in between for very long, but I decided to go with Lace 1. Lace 1 will be the final good tier entry in this list, and let me explain why. Lace 1 was low A for a very long while, but while she is really cool, does introduce Lace mechanics very well that help you in the future, has an absolute stellar OST, probably my second favorite in the game, and is just overall fantastic in nearly every regard, I still think that she's just a bit too simple and easy to be in the A tier. And her presentation is also nothing incredible in Act 1, that is. It's still a really good boss, super well placed, and I just really like it. It's fun to replay even after the other two Lace bosses, and it still doesn't feel too boring. It's also perfect to teach you to use the dash, because it's basically the first boss you fight after it, and she does this job perfectly. First playthrough she kinda kicked my ass, but I don't even know why, because she's not very hard. With that said though, we finally move on to the really great bosses. Sorry if I gave you PTSD, but Morving is landing as the first thing in a great tier. And I do think Morving is just a very good early game boss. This guy is terrifying and probably the biggest step up in difficulty in the whole game. You go from 4th chorus, overall a pretty easy boss, to this terror. This guy, especially before nerf, was just a menace. You can only have 5 masks when you face him, and let me tell you, this guy can kill you quickly. First phase is nothing too bad, but still 2 hours of contact damage, and the sauce, if you don't know what they do, can still obliterate you. But phase 2, when he starts using the sauce in such weird patterns, plus his other attacks, that just gets super terrifying. It's incredibly satisfying positioning wise once you figure out how to do things, but man is it painful to learn. And because of that, I would say I agree with this nerf overall. I think this guy doing 2 damage with the sauce might just be a bit too much. I'm all for the damage increase, I really am. In general, the difficulty increase in Silksong is fantastic and makes the game so much better for me. If the game wasn't a step up from Hollow Knight difficulty wise, I would be disappointed. However, Morving was maybe too much. And while this wasn't my experience and I never really super hard struggled with him, this guy really walled a lot of people, and I do understand why. Because on replays, he also kicked my ass. So Morving, I respect you and I think you're a pretty damn great boss, but I'm also glad Team Cherry toned him down. He's still a super satisfying challenge and probably still like top 3 hardest Act 1 bosses, just not a complete menace. This is one of the saddest placements in the whole video, because Crust King Kong genuinely should have been an S tier boss. This boss was so hyped up and I was just so incredibly thrilled to fight this boss. The presentation is absolutely top tier, the boss soundtrack he has is one of the greatest in the whole game. Man, I just love it so much. My issue is just this boss is way too easy. This boss would be even easy by Act 1 standards. So fighting him with your full-fledged build in Act 3 is just a joke. Don't get me wrong, it's still really fun and everything surrounding the fight is fantastic, like the Coral Tower Gauntlet, some of the best enemy encounters in gaming. It was so fun to get to him, and I do get that the gauntlet before him is a bit brutal, so maybe having a super hard boss would be frustrating. But like, more than this, it's fun, but it's just, the danger is so minimal, and it's just a shame, because if this guy was a bit more challenging, I would put him like high A at least. I absolutely adore his design, his personality, his lore, everything is just on point. With that said though, Crust King Khan is still a great boss. I greatly enjoy him overall, and I'm really glad he exists. Originally, I wasn't sure if I would put Phantom in A or B, but honestly, the more I thought about it and the more I refought Phantom, especially in Act 1, I just realized Phantom is definitely a great boss. Doing her early to get access to the Citadel through the mist is really awesome and made for an even more memorable experience. First, we have the amazing build-up, going through the mist with the very cool music and the awesome atmosphere, then getting to the exhaust organ and facing off this very cool boss in this awesome looking arena with an organ playing. It's super great, and the presentation is definitely something that stuck with me. This is also one of the bosses that can parry you, and it's really fun. In general, bosses taking stances and basically aggression checking you is something I really like, and Phantom does this really well. The skill you get from this boss is also just absolutely fantastic, probably my favorite in the game. It's just so fun. The rest of their moveset is not too crazy, but it's really fun. There are some moves that, for example, utilize the running and sprinting, which Silksong does a few times, and I really do like it. In general, the way she moves, it's once again great positioning stuff, and I just had a lot of fun figuring out how to do this boss more optimally. It's just a really great boss overall, but it just lacks some sauce. And I do firmly believe that if we get the Pantheon update, which is very likely at some point, this boss will get like an enhanced version and it will be really good. Because what we have here are really solid fundamentals, and we can definitely build upon this. Phantom, definitely a great boss, but it could be even more great. Cygnus and Gron is another really impressive boss in the game, because the question is, what if you took two elite enemies and made them into a pretty damn great boss? Because these guys have 2 moves each. Now, this sounds really barren, and it would be, but there are enemies that come in, the arena hazard that comes in later, and just a lot of cool mechanics that add up. Plus, these 2 enemies work just wonderfully as a gank. I hope I don't confuse them, but I think Cygnus is the one with the spinning double blade, who can also throw it as like a boomerang, who is mostly aggression checking you and positioning checking you, and Gron is the guy flying around, who by the way gets introduced earlier into the level. You can dodge some of his attacks, that gets you familiar with his moveset already. Stuff like that is just genius, and I love build up like this because it makes learning the boss way less frustrating. And Gron meanwhile tries to attack you from above, so it's a pretty intense game of positioning. However, these 2 AIs work together wonderfully and it never feels bullshit. After you take out either of these, usually the guy who's there first, you get to fight the other guy and the arena becomes more dangerous. This phase is definitely not as good as the first part of the fight, but it's still solid, and in general this fight is really cool and memorable. It's fun and I do really like it. Nyleth is an awesome looking boss with very interesting but also sad lore, and also just incredible music, though I would say there is one boss this track is used for where it fits even better, which is weird because this soundtrack is named Nyleth. But besides that, the fight is really unique and creative. In this boss you're basically at a tiny platform and have to avoid some attacks by running to the walls or bouncing back projectiles. It's really fun, but in phase 2 this boss literally pulls the rock away from you and removes the platform. Now you have to cling to the wall and dodge the attacks while simultaneously punishing the boss. It's a super cool concept and I do think it's really awesome. Very memorable, very unique, very creative, and I like stuff like that a lot. In general, a lot of her moves get recontextualized by this. It's way harder to knock projectiles back into her, and some moves go from pretty difficult to very hard. It's also super hard to get attack windows in, so this boss is also quite a nice challenge. With that said though, I think this concept could definitely be built upon, and I do think there is more potential for this. So maybe if Team Cherry does like a sequel or maybe like a enhanced version, it could go even harder. Still, this boss is definitely great. First playthrough I didn't think Enraged Conchfly is this good, but honestly on refights I just realized this fight is pretty damn cracked and it went up a lot. After a pretty good duo fight, you get the reason why ganks at the end of the day are always inferior. No, I'm just joking. Ganks can be really great and some all-timers. However, this fight where you fight the solo Conchfly with some backup is way better than the other fight. He's way more aggressive, he's so much faster, you have to react really quickly, there is an insane amount of really cool overlap, and man, it's just such a scary fight. This guy was definitely one of the most terrifying things on Steel Soul, and I do really fear him. He's absolutely terrifying, but also super fair, the telegraphs are good, and the little conch flies are only used as like transitionary attacks and not enemies to gank you. It's a really well made boss, and honestly, probably one of the biggest shocker hits and most underrated bosses in the whole game. This guy is absolutely great. The last judge has so much aura, it's awesome. It's also an awesome way to end off Act 1. After you take the massive climb through Farloom to reach the gates of the Citadel, you get judged. You see your fellow pilgrims being obliterated, and now you have to face this absolute unit of an enemy. Last judge is so cool, awesome OST playing with bells, and you know it's serious. This boss is the aggression and positioning check of Act 1. You can't spam against this boss because the boss attacks too quickly and will punish that relentlessly. Plus, if you are positioned poorly in a corner, the boss will sometimes give you no escape and will absolutely demolish you. And damn will this boss demolish you. This boss does a lot of damage, especially in Act 1 with your limited masks. It's brutal and it can end quickly. However, with that said, this boss really tests everything. Pogos, positioning checks, using your Drifter's Cloak ability. It's absolutely awesome. Phase 2 adds fire to this boss's weapon, which completely recontextualizes some of the moves, and I'm just a big fan of this fight. It's just so evil that this boss explodes at the end. I didn't die to this, but oh man, imagine you grind this boss for an hour or something and then you just die to that. Team Cherry is so incredibly mean, but like, that's just why Silksong's world is so incredibly memorable. Of course, I need to mention the run back that was nerfed a bit, but it's still decently long, and yeah, run backs aren't great, though I still think that this boss overall is pretty damn great. Trobio is a boss that just kept getting better and better for me, and I think he's placed a pretty perfect spot in the game. Obviously, him being a performer, we gotta start with his incredibly memorable presentation. This guy just oozes off of character, basically performing a stage play while fighting you to death. This guy is so fun. There are fireworks, explosions, just everything you want in a cool boss fight, right? Also, him basically just saying his name all the time is absolutely awesome. It's a nice little reprieve from the dark atmosphere of the game. Mechanically, this guy is also quite good and nothing to scoff at. He has his tornado, which is a pretty big reaction check and definitely caught me off guard a few times. He has his exploding balloons, which require good positioning, and he also has his explosions. And the good thing about Trobio is the overlap. Individually, these attacks aren't hard, but when he mixes them up, and especially vanishes in the trapdoor to ambush you with even more, it gets even better. Overall, this is a really great boss. However, I do think some little tweaks could make this truly amazing, because as it stands, the overlap is not as insane yet. I'm sure Team Cherry has something in store for us, right? Maybe I mentioned it before, but I really do love flow in bosses. I mean, my favorite boss ever is Mesmer, who has probably the best flow of all time. So it's not surprising that the second Sentinel was a boss I instantly loved. It has really nice mix-ups and some really cool combo branches, but the best thing about this boss is the non-stop action. There is not a single breath wasted in this fight, every single strike feels purposeful, and everything just has an amazing flow to it. And that's just something that I didn't expect in Silksong. I expected a lot of great positioning fights and such, because Hollow Knight already had this, but Team Cherry going beyond and actually making bosses like this was really cool. You have to react very quickly and be always on your toes, because this boss can turn the tides really quickly and demolish you rather fast. Unfortunately, I had to find this out the hard way, because this stupid ended my Steel Soul run and completely shattered me. It's an absolutely brutal boss, but also incredibly fun, and it's kinda sad that it ends so quickly on a normal run, because this boss doesn't have a lot of HP. I also think that the boss maybe could use a bit more to the quest line, but I do also like the story that the Sentinel protects the Citadel still, so what is there not to love? Your Clanker companion is absolutely awesome, and it's a great boss. Seth is probably the most difficult boss to place for me in the entire game. On one hand, entering the S tier requires you to be truly excellent in some way for me. And while I think a lot of bosses reach this, I'm not 100% sure if Seth has any quality that would put him into the truly amazing tier. On the other hand, this is probably one of the nicest things I've ever seen in a video game. First off, I know everyone probably knows the story by now, but just in case you don't, this is the story of Seth Goldman, who was a Hollow Knight fan who unfortunately was diagnosed with cancer. His dream was to meet Team Cherry, and they granted him this wish. He himself designed this character, and it's just absolutely adorable. I'm just actually stunned that they managed to turn this into one of their greatest characters in the verse. Seth is not only incredibly badass, incredibly awesome, with incredible voice lines, absolutely fun personality, and just an insane aura, he's also just a super likable dude. It's just incredibly awesome that he was put in the game, because unfortunately Seth Goldman has passed. It is a very emotional story, and I just think it's so incredibly awesome that Team Cherry did this for him. I haven't maybe praised Team Cherry enough, maybe only the game, but I truly believe this is not only one of the greatest games, but Team Cherry is also maybe the greatest studio ever. The price for Silksong is absolutely fair. They sell this game for so cheap, and even cheaper in countries that aren't financially well off. This studio is absolutely goated. However, the boss fight is also really good, honestly. He has once again a really good flow like Sentinel. I liked him pretty much equally fight-wise, but he also has some really nice mix-ups that manage to throw me off quite a bit, and he just requires really quick reaction. The music from Nylev also somehow fits this fight even better. I don't know, just a very memorable boss. Is the boss itself S? Probably not. But is the overall experience with the context of the community and what Team Cherry did for Seth maybe worthy of the first S tier? Absolutely. That's why I'm deciding to place Seth in S. Now then, let's start with the official S tier. And the first S boss, where I'm sure it's S, but just barely, is Grandmother Silk. Of course, when I first fought this boss, I knew this couldn't be the true final boss. This was more of the equivalent to the Hollow Knight. This boss feels like an upgraded version of base Radiance. It has some very cool attacks with the needles, and especially phase 2 with the area denial through the spikes and the debris falling, comboing pretty well with the needles. It's really good. Mechanically pretty fun. However, it wouldn't be enough to put it in S for now. The two reasons why I decided to go with S, however, are the presentation and story. Grandmother Silk is the starting point of the entire Silksong lore. It's an absolutely crucial figure and the whole game wouldn't happen without her. It's super important and for that alone it deserves some praise. And the music with the way this boss is presented is also just so incredibly cool. However, the real reason that gave it the final nudge towards S tier for me was the really cool curse quest. It's a super optional quest that you can easily miss, but if you do it this way, you get an extra ending, and that's just really cool. Fighting this boss cursed also makes this fight way more intense because you can't use any tools, any silk skills, and you can't heal. So I really had to learn the moveset for this. And for that I decided to award Grandmother Silk the first official S tier. At first I wasn't sure if Widow was S tier because while it was a really great boss and definitely my favorite in Act 1 overall, I wasn't sure if it was quite up there. But after a few runs, I'm now pretty sure. This is a pretty perfect early game boss and honestly up there as one of the greatest. This boss truly requires all your effort. You need to react quickly, you need to mind your positioning, be aware of projectiles and their weird trajectory, there is area denial, and the boss is also just presented wonderfully. You have to free Belhard, which would become your main hub from this weird curse, and it just feels so ominous and scary at first. But later you find out there is some kind of Weaver entity there. And yes, while not a completely pure Weaver, it definitely has some Weaver qualities. Finally, the spider fight we all wanted in Hollow Knight. It's also so cool that Widow doesn't only fight with threat, but also uses the things from Belhard. Like for example, throwing bells at you. It's also the point in the game where you unlock probably the most important thing in the game, the Needlen. This is pretty much the equivalent of the Dream Nail and required for everything in the game after. So don't even think about skipping this boss. Phase 1 is already really nice and probably would be an A tier, but what puts this in S tier for sure is the phase 2 fake out. First playthrough I thought phase 1 was pretty difficult, but I did it, so I'm done. And then the shocking phase 2 with the absolute best part of the OST, which is a banger by the way. The OST for Widow is so good. So when that kicked in, I just knew I'm cooked. And I was cooked because Widow definitely kicked my ass at first. But damn was it a rewarding experience. Overall Widow, really awesome, and it just gets way better from now on. The next two fights are pretty much interchangeable and equal for me, so there won't be much of a disparity here. But I will start with the Clover Dancers, because I think while these are mechanically better, I slightly prefer the moment and presentation of the others. But first, let's start with these. These guys have the saddest story in like the whole game. If not, it's definitely up there. One of these two decided to give his life in order for the Citadel to leave the Kingdom of Verdania alone. However, it still withered away despite of that. It's a really tragic story, but more on that later. The Green Prince is honestly one of the saddest quest lines. He's just depressed the whole game and I just feel so bad for him. Anyway, let's go murder these two guys. We enter the dreams in Act 3 through the new ritual we get from the shamans, and now we have to like collect the primal heart so we can perform some special spell to save Farloom from the void. Mechanically, this is basically an enhancement of the Cockburg Dancers, but there are 4 important changes that completely recontextualize this fight. Number 1, the arena is way smaller, which makes positioning way more tight. Number 2, they start in a harder phase, which leaves you longer in the best part of the fight. Number 3, there's only one target, which makes you have to prioritize that and also bring yourself in positions where you can hit that target exactly. And number 4, the free dance attack before that served as an easy silk skill opening is now one of the most dangerous attacks and needs your full attention. Overall, I like this boss quite a lot. I would honestly put it above Mantis Lords, but at the end of the day, I decided to go with the mechanical yaoi clankers. Because honestly, over the years, I grew to probably slightly prefer presentation. I don't know, prefer is not the right word, but I just really do value it. And Cockburg Dancer encounter was one of the most impactful moments on our first playthrough. First, let me talk about the incredible use of the OST. The way the OST ramps up with the pace of the fight is absolutely phenomenal and honestly one of my favorite uses of boss music in the game. So that means the first phase starts out decently chill, the second one ramps up, but in the third one they're off sync and at their fastest. And after this I thought, surely after 3 phases it's over. But at the end I saw that one of the guys who was left got up. At first I expected he would enter an enraged mode or something because we killed his partner, but no. A sad music box version of the soundtrack plays and he just slowly continues his dance. He even tries to do the dance attack he did before, but now it just doesn't work anymore and he falls to the ground. It's genuinely just depressing and once again just a completely gut-wrenching story in Silksong. I honestly can't praise Team Cherry enough for their outstanding work on this game, and I think the questline of the Green Prince is amongst my favorites. It's absolutely incredible and one just must imagine the Green Prince happy. Well, now we are getting into the juicy stuff. Lace 2 is an insane step up from the first fight. I did her pretty late on the first run, so while it was still a decent challenge, it didn't take too long. However, doing it on a replay without double jump and with lower damage and stats definitely made it quite a fantastic fight. All your dodges have to be super precise and you really need to master all her mechanics. There are two counters that both require a distinct response, which is absolutely something I didn't expect Team Cherry to do, but I really enjoy the mechanic, and the phases just keep on adding stuff. First phase has her base moveset, second phase adds some of the follow-ups to her dash attacks, and phase 3 of course adds her pretty iconic lace whirl or whatever I'm going to call it. It's super awesome and just mastering it, getting punish windows, being able to react on the fly, everything required in this fight is top tier. The arena is also maybe the best in the game or up there. It's absolutely stunning. The cutscene is such a great setup. I love cutscenes in Hollow Knight. Music, already mentioned it in the Lace 1 segment, but music, once again, absolutely phenomenal, one of the best in the game. There is just nothing really to dislike in this fight. It's probably already a fight I like more than anything in base Hollow Knight, besides maybe Pure Vessel. So yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. Love it. So imagine if you take an already great boss and basically improve him in every single way. Well, that's what Team Cherry asked themselves, I guess, when they were creating Tormented Trobio, which is another phenomenal boss in Silksong. Yep, you heard me right. Take everything I said about Trobio and ramp it up to 100. His tornado becomes an even crazier positioning and reaction check because the two tornadoes that split off now also leave an after trail that also can hit you. The area denial confetti that was mostly zoning you now becomes a brutal positioning and reaction check as well because of the new cross explosion. He can either do vertically or diagonally. It's probably one of the hardest things, and you also have to really pay attention because sometimes it can be obstructed by his animations. I don't know if it's on purpose, but I really like it. Besides that, all the attacks become faster, the balloons have now a cross explosion, chaos just becomes even bigger. This is also just how I would call the name. It's just pure chaos and I absolutely love it. Now then, is there maybe sometimes some unfortunate RNG? Maybe. I don't know. I feel like you can't avoid everything most of the time and pretty fair, but maybe there is some bullshit. Possibly. Do I care in the slightest? No. Honestly, a fight doesn't need to be 100% fair. As long as it's not like completely unavoidable consistent BS, like for example the pre-patch cross-slash from PCR in Shadow of the Erdtree, I'm fine with some insane tomfoolery. With that said though, I understand if someone who maybe likes consistency in fights doesn't like it that much. Tormented Trobio is the first boss I'd consider better than every boss in Hollow Knight as well. It's basically just like the Trobio presentation on crack and a truly fantastic and chaotic moveset. Just not enough to get into the top 3. I feel like it would be an absolute sin to not have this boss in your top 3, because yes, the first Sinner is the first boss I pick for the holy trinity of Silksong bosses. I feel like this order is pretty much unanimously agreed upon as the 3 best bosses in the game, but honestly any order goes. I can see them all. And yeah, as much hype as this boss gets from the community, it's all absolutely deserved. Not only is this boss better than anything in Hollow Knight in my opinion, this is also the queen of overlaps and honestly just Widow on crack. I think in phase 2 there are even sometimes overlaps of like 3 attacks at once, which is insane. The flow is also just incredible. The way this boss teleports around, filling up the whole room with some crazy needles, explosions, it's great. Her melees are also super dangerous, and I really like the fact that if you mastered or learned the Widow fight, it will absolutely help you in this fight. Because yes, this is a pure-blooded weaver, and man does it live up to it. Also starting to use the claw line to weave between more attacks and close the gap just makes it even more fun, man. You can be so aggressive and have so much fun. And yeah, just like Widow, this boss also has a phase 2 breakout. But here I wasn't as surprised. I already came to expect this. And yet, it's just one attack, but honestly, it makes the fight so much better, man. Having even one more variable just makes it even more intense, and I don't know, it's just absolutely goated. The presentation is goated because I did not expect to find one of the greatest bosses of this year in this random tucked away corner of the slab, but man was I glad I did. Goated boss, love it, and and I can't believe there are still 2 bosses I like even more. Team Cherry, how can you cook this hard? The Queen of the Scars, Carmelita, is genuinely a fight where I would say it feels like a dance. And it is by design. The music, the way she fights, her fighting style is absolutely fantastic, and it might be the second best flow in a boss I've ever seen. While Mesmer is probably still my favorite, this is a close second. But we'll get into it. This boss truly has everything I adore. Amazing build up and atmosphere, top tier presentation with a stunning looking arena, music that is tied to her boss fight as well, because every time you stagger her, she stops singing. Plus, of course, the track itself being incredible and one of the best in the game, like as if that wasn't a given. Of course, I need to mention maybe a little thorn in some people's eye, the little gauntlet before the boss. I personally think it's good, but maybe it should just stay dead after you beat it once. Though I don't mind it because you can just spam infinite tools and get through it quickly, so it's fine. But yeah, this boss starts off decently simple. It introduces all her attacks, but nothing too crazy. Phase 2, she starts to chain them together and it gets new attacks, plus some attacks get some expansions, but the craziest change in my opinion is by far phase 3, because I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, that this boss literally doesn't stop attacking in phase 3. And for some this might sound bullshit or crazy or unfair, but I think it's absolutely incredible. Like, not only is this full-on action that doesn't stop besides if you stagger her, it's also all completely fair, avoidable, and flows perfectly. It's honestly just a incredible achievement in boss design, and I can't praise this boss enough. 10 out of 10. If this was the best boss in the game, I would be satisfied. Hell, I would be satisfied if Tormented Trobia was the best boss in the game. But Silksong or Team Cherry decided to still go one further. Well, by this logic, it can only be one boss. I don't know, I can explain why, but I'm always just super happy when the final boss also turns out to be my favorite. It feels like a culmination of the journey, and it just feels like the beautiful cherry on the top. No pun intended. Getting to this point was pretty insane. I mean, just think about it. Think about your first playthrough of Silksong, about the long journey, all the pain, all the joy, everything you lived through it. And Lace was your constant rival, teasing you, fighting you, attacking you, demolishing you, and now you stand against her at her strongest. She has no desire but just to fight you. The stage is set beautifully, the scenery looks stunning, and once you approach Silk, Lace ambushes you. Now you begin phase 1. As the good Silksong bosses do, phase 1 basically explains to you how this fight works. It shows you some of the mix-ups, some of the extensions, but mostly just her base moveset. It's not too complex, but if you don't grasp this, you just won't survive phase 2, because phase 2 adds the void attacks that all the enemies have been getting. And adding these to the Lace moveset just works incredibly well. I don't even understand why this works so good, but damn it does it work amazingly. It makes the positioning on all the moves so intense, and it's just a joy, and the flow is also really good. Now after you defeat this boss, you get a fake out, which is a pretty obvious one, but what follows is really cool. These massive piles of void or whatever dash at you were so cool looking, and it's also the only attack that gets added in this phase if I'm not wrong. However, the music ramps up and the best part of the fight begins. And after you defeat phase 3, phase 4 introduces one last time her iconic move, but by far the most fun and coolest iteration out of it. It's just a stunning boss fight and probably my favorite 2D boss of all time. Everything about this fight is great. And not only that, but you get also one of the most impactful endings to a video game ever. What is there not to love? It's genuinely, even a 10 out of 10 doesn't do this boss and game justice. It's just that good. And holy shaw, we are finally at the end of this ranking. First off, I'm unbelievably sorry that the interval between the last 2 videos was so long. I played this game a lot. I really wanted to get like a good grasp on the game, on the bosses and everything. Plus, I had college and I have a lot of other things to do. But I'm really glad to finally have finished this project. It was the most fun I ever had making a ranking video, and I really do think that I got some interesting points on some of the bosses. But now we come to the part where you become active. Please tell me in the comments what you think about Silksong and the bosses. Can I maybe convince you that Growl is a pretty good boss, or do you still think it's absolutely horrendous? Or did you maybe even agree with me and think Growl is nice and great? Let me know how wrong or right I am. And remember, it's just subjective opinions. Everyone has their takes and their preferences, so no reason to get super heated about it. But with this, thank you so much for watching this long video. I really appreciate it, and even if you disliked it, still thank you for watching. I also appreciate your time. I'm not sure what the next video will be, but I know that very soon we will have top 10 bosses of the year, and there definitely will be a few Silksong bosses there. So I hope you're looking forward to that as well. And with that said, for the final time, thank you for watching, and I hope I will see you here for the next video. Until then, bye!